Is it possible to get rid of your heavy bleeding without needing birth control, without needing a hysterectomy, without needing tranexamic acid? Let's dive into it. Hi, I'm Dr. Bala. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I have helped thousands of women get rid of their heavy bleeding without needing surgical intervention or synthetic hormones. So let's first dive into why heavy bleeding even happens in the first place. There are a few different factors that we consider when you have heavy bleeding. The first one is going to be high estrogen. If your estrogen levels are really high, what happens is we are stimulating your uterine lining to grow thicker and thicker. That is the purpose of estrogen. So the more estrogen we have, the more that lining is going to get thicker and thicker and thicker, and the more bleeding you're going to have. Because remember, your period is that lining being shed. The more lining you have, the more bleeding you're having to shed all of it out. If you are having so much estrogen that it is creating a very thick lining and it has nowhere else to go, it's not getting excreted properly, what's going to happen is you also end up with things like fibroids, cysts, and other issues that can also worsen the heavy bleeding. So that is a huge factor that I see in women who have heavy bleeding is their estrogen levels are really high or their body is unable to get rid of the estrogen properly. The second factor is low progesterone. Remember, if you have issues with high estrogen, you often have issues with low progesterone as well. They usually go hand in hand. Most women who have heavy bleeding have really high estrogen levels and low progesterone levels, or sometimes progesterone can be adequate. However, estrogen is so high that the ratio is off. And progesterone is responsible for stabilizing that uterine lining. So if our mood swings are really bad, if you get hot flashes, if you have a history of fibroids, if you have endometriosis or pain along with the heavy bleeding, that's a huge clue to us that your progesterone levels may also be low. And lastly, we have inflammation. And this can be from stress, from metabolic factors, so many different places can be causing inflammation. It could be from your gut. It could be from your environment. It could be from your diet. There are so many places that we can have inflammatory issues causing bleeding that is a little bit heavier. So again, if you have heavy bleeding along with pain, along with PMS symptoms, that's a sign that you also have to work on those inflammatory levels. Let's dive into what our conventional options are, right? Because you go to your doctor and you tell them, hey, I'm bleeding through a super ultra tampon every 30 minutes. And they're like, okay, well, have you tried birth control? And some of you may have already tried birth control. You might have been like, yeah, I already did it. And I absolutely hated it. It made me feel miserable. I felt really crazy and I don't want to have to be on it. And they're like, great, here's tranexamic acid. Try this. So tranexamic acid works by increasing the way that your blood is clotting. It's helping your blood clot more efficiently, which is helping you bleed less. So that is all that it is doing. It is not addressing the root cause of why you're bleeding heavy in the first place. So if you are using tranexamic acid, you'll have to use it every single cycle until you hit menopause or until the bleeding just resolves on its own, which for many people it doesn't. And we, like I said, we see other issues like fibroids and cysts and infertility and other factors. The other option is birth control, right? How many of you have been told take birth control, even though you've said, I don't want to be on it? And I cannot tell you how many people I have had a discovery call with where they said, Dr. Bala, I told them I didn't want birth control, but at this point, that's all I've been offered. And I'm so desperate that I kind of just want to try it because I have no other options. So I'm here to tell you that's just not enough, right? Having heavy bleeding and being told that you just have to try birth control, even though you don't want to, should not be your only options. And then lastly, we have a hysterectomy, which is a major surgery. And a lot of women who I've worked with or who are in their 20s and 30s who haven't yet had a kid, who really want to have a kid, are like, well, hysterectomy is just not an option for me. I can't just get rid of my uterus. One. And two, even if you are in your 40s and you've already had kids and you want to get rid of a hysterectomy, it is a major surgery. It will take you out for a couple of weeks for that recovery. And you're missing a vital organ, right? And again, not addressing the root cause. So if we get rid of your uterus, that's great. You don't have the heavy bleeding anymore. However, all of those other symptoms that come along with high estrogen, like hot flashes and mood swings and irritability and night sweats and waking up in the middle of the night or feeling really tired or having all of these other perimenopausal type of symptoms can also still continue even if you still have your ovaries and you're producing hormones. The only thing that happens is you don't have the risk of fibroids anymore and you're not bleeding. So if those are your only concerns and you want a hysterectomy, go for it. However, there are other things that we can do. And listen, all of these options, they're not wrong. They're not the only way. and they're not a long-term fix. So here's what's being missed in conventional medicine that naturopathic medicine does really well. I'm going to give you examples of 3 different women that I've worked with. One came to me with hemorrhaging. She was bleeding so heavily she had to take an entire week off of work every single month. And doctors couldn't figure out what was going on. She was in her late 20s and they told her just get a hysterectomy. She hadn't had any kids. She really wanted to have kids. She did not want a hysterectomy. The other person came to me with slightly heavy bleeding. However, her main issue was weight gain and fatigue along with the heavy bleeding. And then the third woman that I saw, fibroids. Her bleeding was moderate to heavy, but her main concern was how can I shrink these fibroids? So all of these women had 3 different issues going on. However, they all stemmed from the same place, which is their estrogen wasn't getting cleared out. But we did it differently. I didn't give them birth control. I didn't give them tranexamic acid, and I didn't tell them to get a hysterectomy. What we worked on was what they needed. For the first girl who had really heavy bleeding that she was taking a full week off of work, when we looked at her labs, her estrogen was actually in a normal range. However, her progesterone was really low, and she had a lot of symptoms of liver metabolism of her estrogen not clearing out. So that is what we worked on for her. For the second girl who had bleeding and weight gain and fatigue issues, we saw that her thyroid was completely out of range, Once we started addressing that, her bleeding went down, she had more energy, and she started losing weight. For the third girl who had fibroids, we worked on inflammatory levels, we worked on the estrogen metabolism, and we worked on her gut. So 3 women with very similar issues with heavy bleeding, we did completely different things. And that is something that conventional medicine often misses. You are the person that we're looking at, not your symptoms. And so what else is going on in your picture? What does your environment look like? What does your sleep look like? What does your bedtime routine look like? What does your nutrition look like? What are you putting into your body? How are you handling stress? All of these things matter when it comes to your health. And these are all things that your doctor is never asking you about, but it is very important for us.